He was the hero. America believed in the protector in The Bodyguard, the dreamer in Field of Dreams, the man who turned a quiet Western into an Oscar legend. But behind the calm voice and steady eyes was a life torn apart by storms no one ever saw. A brother who died before he was born, a childhood spent moving from place to place, years of rejection in Hollywood, the collapse of 2 marriages, the deaths of both parents, and a heartbreak linked to Whitney Houston he never fully recovered from. This isn't the story of a superstar. This is the story of a man who spent 70 years learning to rise every time life tried to break him. What if the man the world remembers for his calm strength was built from storms no one ever saw? Most people know Kevin Costner through the characters he played. They remember the protective bodyguard who stood like a wall beside Whitney Houston, the gentle farmer in Field of Dreams who followed a voice only he could hear, or the quiet soldier in Dances with Wolves who searched for peace in a world full of conflict. These roles made people believe he was naturally strong, steady, calm, and unshakable. Audiences saw courage, loyalty, and goodness whenever he appeared on screen. Many people even felt comfort by simply watching him, as if he carried a kind of strength they wished they had themselves. But the truth is very different. Behind the roles, behind the awards, behind the famous face, there was a man shaped by pain that started long before Hollywood ever knew his name. His calm came from surviving things that most people never saw, and his strength grew from trying to hold himself together when life around him was falling apart. Kevin's early life was very simple and very hard at the same time. His parents worked every day just to keep the family going. His father, Bill Costner, had a tough job as a ditch digger and repairman. He came home tired, covered in dirt, with hands that showed how much effort he put in. His mother, Sharon, worked as a social worker. She listened to the problems of others all day, tried to help them, and still came home to take care of her family with kindness. They had no luxury, no easy days, and they did not talk much about their feelings, but their love for their children was real. Before Kevin was born, his parents faced a tragedy that changed the atmosphere of the whole home. In 1953, their son Mark Douglas was born, but he lived for only 1 day. His death left a shadow that never fully went away. When a child dies, a house changes forever. Even if people do not speak about it, the sadness becomes part of the air. Kevin grew up in that quiet sadness without knowing exactly where it came from. He only felt that something was always slightly heavy, slightly unspoken, slightly different. His father became more strict after losing a child. He was protective and wanted everything in the house to be safe and controlled. His mother became gentler, softer, and quieter, as if she was holding pain inside her heart but did not want to burden anyone else. Kevin grew up seeing his mother stare into empty corners as if she was remembering someone. He saw his father tighten his jaw at random moments, as if trying not to think about something painful. Even as a small child, Kevin understood that silence sometimes means hurt, not peace. This early understanding shaped the way he dealt with emotions all his life. Because of his father's work, the family moved many times. Kevin did not have a stable childhood with one home and one school. Instead, he moved from Compton to Ventura to Visalia to Orange County. Every time he started getting used to a place, they had to pack again. He got used to the sound of tape being pulled across cardboard boxes. He learned how to say goodbye to friends he barely had time to make. He entered new classrooms again and again, always being the boy no one knew. Teachers often forgot his name, not because he wasn't smart, but because he was quiet and shy. He never tried to stand out. He just wanted to fit in. but fitting in became difficult when life kept pulling him from one place to another. These moves made Kevin feel invisible, and invisibility can hurt a young mind. But this constant uprooting also made him strong in a quiet way. He learned how to start over without complaining. He learned how to observe people before speaking. He learned how to adjust to new environments quickly. These skills later helped his acting because he could read emotions and understand silence more deeply than many others. Even with all the moving, he tried to find spaces where he felt safe. He wrote poems because it was easier to express feelings in writing than speaking. He often sat alone and dreamed of a place where he would finally belong, a place that stayed still instead of slipping away every time he felt comfortable. He joined the church choir and realized he liked using his voice, not for attention, but because singing made him feel connected to something warm. When he did well in sports, he felt a small sense of confidence, but he never bragged. Confidence never came from applause for him. It came from small, private victories. Kevin carried silence like a second skin. Adults around him spoke little about hard things, so he learned to process emotions quietly. This also meant he grew up with a strong inner world. He understood early that life can be unstable, people can be hurting quietly, and a home can be full of love and sadness at the same time. This became the emotional foundation for the realistic, restrained characters he would later play. His roles felt believable because they came from a real place. He knew what it was like to carry quiet wounds and still move forward. He knew what it felt like to try to be steady in a world that keeps shifting. As he grew older, the early instability gave him a kind of resilience that did not look dramatic, but was powerful. He did not break easily, because he had already practiced rebuilding his sense of self over and over as a child. He learned how to stay calm when everything around him felt uncertain. He learned how to trust his inner voice because the outside world was always changing. These lessons became important throughout his life, especially when he faced the pressures of Hollywood, the failures, the losses, the public judgment, and the private heartbreaks that would shape his later years. But no storm of childhood could prepare him for the moment that would force him to choose between a safe life and the terrifying edge of destiny. What happens when destiny walks up to you on an airplane and whispers a truth you didn't know you were ready to hear? In his early 20s, Kevin Costner was living the kind of life most parents dream about for their children. He had graduated from California State University, Fullerton, with a business degree. He had a steady job that paid enough for bills, rent, and a clean shirt. Every morning, he had a polite salary, a desk, co-workers who liked him, and a future that looked safe and predictable. From the outside, nothing was wrong. But on the inside, he felt a quiet, slow suffocation. Every morning when he put on his work clothes, he felt a small part of himself shrink. Every evening when he came home, he felt something empty. He was not surrounded by drama or crisis. He was surrounded by routine, and for Kevin, routine felt like a slow death. It wasn't loud or painful. It was slow, polite, and invisible. But he could feel his real self fading under it. He tried to convince himself that this was adulthood. This was what responsible men did. They worked, they earned, they paid bills, they followed the expected path. His parents were proud. His friends thought he was sensible. But deep inside, a small voice kept tapping gently, refusing to be ignored. It wasn't shouting. It wasn't dramatic. It was simply asking, "Is this really the life you want?" But Kevin pushed that voice down because he was afraid of what it might demand from him. Then came the moment that changed everything. He had just married his college sweetheart, Cindy, and they were flying home from their honeymoon in Mexico. They found their seats on the plane and settled in. It was supposed to be a normal flight, quiet and uneventful. But when Kevin looked to his right, his heart nearly stopped. Sitting just a few feet away was Richard Burton, one of the most respected actors in the world. Burton had a presence that filled the space around him. He didn't even need to speak for people to feel it. His face showed wisdom, mistakes, and a life lived fully. His eyes had a depth that made Kevin feel like the man could see straight into his thoughts. Kevin gathered his courage and introduced himself. His voice shook a little. He told Burton he admired him. He confessed something he had barely admitted to himself. He wanted to act. He wanted a different life. He wanted to chase something he could not explain. Burton looked at him for a long moment, studying him with a seriousness that surprised Kevin. Then, with a calm voice, Burton said something simple but powerful. He told Kevin, "You have green eyes. I have green eyes. I think you'll be fine." It didn't make logical sense, but it hit Kevin deeply. It was as if Burton was saying, "You belong. You have a place. You can do this." When the plane landed, Burton stepped into a waiting limousine. Kevin and Cindy waited for the bus. Before the car door closed, Burton leaned out and said two words that carried more weight than anything Kevin had heard in his life. "Good luck." Those two words tore open something inside him. The dream he had been burying suddenly pushed its way to the surface. He could no longer pretend the life he was living was enough. Within weeks, he quit his job. His parents were shocked. They were worried. They didn't understand why their son was giving up stability for something so uncertain. Kevin understood their fear, but he also knew that if he didn't take this step, he would regret it forever. He and Cindy moved to Los Angeles so he could try acting. The city didn't welcome him. In fact, it barely noticed him. His first months were full of hunger, loneliness, and rejection. He took any job he could find. He scrubbed boat hulls, drove trucks, worked as a stage manager, and even gave bus tours of movie stars' homes. He would point out the houses of famous actors while quietly wondering if anyone would ever point at his home one day. Nights were the hardest. Their apartment was cold, and the heater often failed. Kevin slept fully clothed to stay warm. They ate cheap food because they had to save every dollar. Sometimes he walked instead of taking the bus just to save the fare. Auditions rarely led anywhere. Most ended with the same painful words: "Leave your photo." It was the era when being forgettable hurt more than hearing no. He would leave his picture behind and walk out, knowing he would probably never hear from them again. Being cut from the film The Big Chill was one of the hardest blows. He had been cast, shot scenes, and believed he finally had a real break. But when the movie was released, every scene he appeared in was removed. His name stayed in the credits, but his face was nowhere to be found. He went to the premiere anyway, hoping to see himself on screen, and ended up sitting in the theater with a quiet heartbreak that almost made him quit acting for good. But Kevin didn't quit. Every night, he told himself, one more day, one more try. He kept going to acting classes. He kept pushing himself, even when it felt pointless. He learned discipline from the pain. He learned patience from rejection. He learned to rely on his belief instead of the world's approval. He understood that progress in Hollywood was slow, and survival meant staying steady even when you felt invisible. The struggle continued for years. 6 long years of work, hope, disappointment, and silence. But after 6 years of closed doors, something unexpected finally cracked a tiny opening that would change the entire direction of Hollywood. What do you do when the world finally sees you, but you're still carrying the wounds of years spent unseen? After 6 long years of rejection and disappointment, Kevin Costner was used to being ignored. He had learned how to walk into a room without expecting anything, how to deliver lines knowing he might never hear back, and how to keep trying even when the world acted like he didn't exist. So, when he finally got a chance that was real, it felt almost strange. His first spark of recognition came with the movie Silverado in 1985. It wasn't a huge role, but it was the first time people stopped and said, "Who is that guy?" Viewers noticed his natural charm, his loose confidence, and the way he seemed comfortable on screen without trying too hard. He didn't look like he was acting. He looked like he belonged there. That was new for him, and new for the audience. Silverado didn't make him a star overnight, but it made Hollywood curious. Directors, producers, and casting agents started to ask questions. They wondered whether this new actor had something special, or if he was just another fresh face who would come and go. For Kevin, the attention felt both exciting and unsettling. He had been invisible for so long that being noticed felt almost risky, as if the world might take it away from him again at any moment. But he stayed calm, the way he had learned to be during the quiet years of struggle. Then came the role that changed everything. Elliot Ness in The Untouchables. This film transformed Kevin from a newcomer into a leading man. His character was strong without being loud, moral without being self-righteous, and confident without being arrogant. People responded to the quiet power he brought to the role. It reminded them of the heroes they wished existed in real life, men who didn't need to shout to be strong. This was the birth of what people later called Kevin's quiet hero style. He didn't rely on dramatic speeches or flashy actions. His power came from honesty, steadiness, and simple courage. It was a style that fit him perfectly because it came from who he was as a person. Right after that success, he took another step forward with Bull Durham. This movie allowed him to show a different side of himself: funny, relaxed, charming, and romantic without trying too hard. His character had confidence, but it came from experience, not ego. People saw him as a man who understood life, understood people, and carried himself in a grounded way. The film made him relatable to both men and women, and it proved that he could lead a movie in more than one way. His range was becoming clear to everyone. Then came Field of Dreams in 1989, one of the most meaningful roles of his entire life. This movie touched audiences deeply because it wasn't just a story about baseball, it was a story about family, regret, hope, and forgiveness. Kevin's performance felt deeply personal. He played a man searching for healing, wanting to fix something broken inside him. People felt the truth in his performance. It wasn't just acting, it came from somewhere real. Viewers believed him because he wasn't pretending. He understood the feeling of wanting to repair something in your heart, to reconnect with something lost, and to hold on to a hope others didn't understand. The role connected with the quieter wounds he had carried since childhood. The moves, the loneliness, the invisible weight of family grief. His childhood taught him to listen to silence, and that silence allowed him to bring honesty to the screen. By now, audiences trusted him in a way they didn't trust most actors. They felt they knew him. They felt he wasn't hiding anything. His authenticity wasn't manufactured. It came from the years he spent unnoticed, the years he spent struggling, and the years he spent observing life instead of being at the center of it. People can sense when someone is genuine. Kevin's performances were grounded in real emotion, not dramatic tricks. That's why people connected with him. They felt he was one of them, even when he was becoming famous. With rising fame also came new pressures. Studios wanted him in more films. Reporters followed him. Expectations grew larger every year. He handled the attention carefully, but inside, he was carrying a new kind of weight. People now expected perfection. Every film had to succeed. Every performance had to be strong. And while the attention was flattering, it also made him think about what he wanted his career to be. Acting was no longer enough. He wanted more control over the stories he told. He wanted to create something meaningful, something that went deeper than entertainment. A new idea started, forming inside him, small at first, like a whisper. It was the idea that he could direct, that he could build a world, not just stand in one. The thought scared him. Directing meant risk. It meant responsibility. It meant standing behind a vision that others might not understand. But the idea wouldn't leave him. It grew louder, stronger, clearer. He remembered the feeling he had years earlier when he quit his job to chase acting. That same feeling returned. A mix of fear and possibility, a mix of doubt and excitement. And somewhere inside him, he knew he had to try. Then came Dances with Wolves. At first, it was only an idea, a story that wouldn't let go of his mind. He could see the characters, the world, and the emotions it carried. It called to him in a way he couldn't ignore. He felt he had something real to say, something honest, something important. It wasn't just another film. It was a chance to create something meaningful, something that could last. So, he made the decision to step into creative leadership, to direct, to risk everything he had earned, to trust his voice. But when he finally dared to chase the biggest dream of his career, the world didn't applaud. In fact, everyone told him it would destroy him. How far would you go for a vision no one else believes in, not even your closest friends? When Kevin Costner decided to make Dances with Wolves, almost everyone around him thought he was making a terrible mistake. The studios laughed at the idea and rejected it again and again. They said the movie was too long, too quiet, too slow, and too focused on Native American culture for audiences to care. Some executives even said the film would destroy his career. They warned him that no one wanted a 3-hour Western in a time when action movies were dominating the box office. They told him he was risking everything he had worked for. But Kevin felt something inside him that he couldn't ignore. He believed in the story. He believed in the characters. He believed the film needed to exist, even if no one else understood why. To make it happen, he had to take the biggest risk of his life. He mortgaged his own money, millions of dollars he couldn't afford to lose. He had a growing family, responsibilities, and a strong career. But still, he put almost everything he had into the film because his belief was stronger than his fear. This wasn't blind confidence. He was scared. He was afraid of embarrassing himself, afraid of losing his home, afraid of disappointing the people who trusted him. But he also knew that some dreams require stepping into danger. So he pushed forward, even when it felt impossible. The filming process quickly turned into a nightmare. Storms destroyed sets that had taken weeks to build. Wind ripped through equipment. Rain washed away props. Each setback cost money, and money Kevin didn't really have. Some actors quit. Crew members grew frustrated. The production fell behind schedule. The budget kept rising. And every time someone updated him with new financial numbers, they were worse than the last. People who once supported him began to doubt him. Some whispered that he was in over his head. Others said he had lost his mind. Even friends questioned his judgment. But Kevin refused to give up. Through all the chaos, he held tightly to one rule. He would not cut the quiet moments. Hollywood told him to shorten the film, to remove the long pauses, the simple scenes, the meaningful silences. They called those moments boring. But Kevin believed they were the heart of the story. He believed they gave the film its soul. He didn't want noise for the sake of noise. He wanted truth. So he stood firm, even when it increased the risk, even when everyone doubted him, even when he felt alone. And he was alone. Carrying a vision that no one else supports can feel like walking through darkness without a light. Kevin had to rely on his own judgment every day, even when his confidence shook. Directed films need strong leadership, but he was leading while carrying fear, debt, pressure, and the stress of being responsible for hundreds of people on set. It was one of the loneliest periods of his life. When the film finally premiered, even Kevin didn't know what to expect. He hoped for survival, not success. But instead of failure, something unbelievable happened. Audiences connected with the story in a way the studios never expected. People cried, people stood and applauded. The film became a massive hit, earning $424 million worldwide. Critics praised it. Viewers embraced it. Dances with Wolves went on to win 7 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director. Kevin had achieved something no one believed he could. He had proven that quiet stories and emotional truth still mattered. But victory came with a strange side effect. After so many years of struggle and fear, he found himself feeling strangely numb. Success didn't rush through him with excitement. Instead, he felt tired. He felt older. Achieving his dream came with a weight he didn't expect. When a dream finally becomes real, it doesn't always look or feel the way you imagined. Part of him wondered if the journey had taken more from him than he realized. Still, his career reached its highest point in the years that followed. Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, exploded at the box office. JFK showed a more intense political side of him, proving he was not afraid to take on difficult and controversial stories. Then came The Bodyguard in 1992, which would become one of the most iconic films of his career. Working with Whitney Houston became one of the most meaningful professional relationships he ever had. She trusted him, leaned on him, and learned from him. He guided her through her acting fears, and she respected him deeply. Their connection was built on honesty and mutual support, something both of them valued. But non-stop success took a toll. The travel, the pressure, constant demands, the lack of rest, it wore him down physically and emotionally. He was stretched thin, and the effort to maintain his place in Hollywood took more strength than the public ever saw. Kevin was becoming a symbol, not a person. People saw him as the strong protector, the steady hero, the man who always knew what to do. But symbols are heavy to carry. They take away the freedom to be imperfect, tired, or vulnerable. As his fame reached its peak, the expectations around him grew larger than life. Everyone wanted something from him: studios, fans, media, friends, and even strangers. The public didn't just admire him, they projected their own hopes onto him. They expected him to always be wise, always be strong, always be calm. But real human beings cannot live under that pressure forever. And that pressure was about to break. Because the higher he rose, the more mercilessly Hollywood sharpened its knives, and the fall, when it came, was brutal. What happens when everything you built with your own hands begins to crumble, one headline at a time? After years of success, Kevin Costner entered a period where every step forward seemed to turn into a setback. The trouble began with Waterworld in 1995, a film that started as an ambitious idea but quickly became a nightmare. Storms destroyed sets that cost millions to build. Waves damaged equipment. Boats sank or malfunctioned. The entire production fell behind schedule again and again. Every delay meant more money spent, and the budget kept growing until it became one of the most expensive films ever attempted at the time. Newspapers followed every problem without mercy, reporting every mistake and every dollar lost. They mocked the project, calling it Kevin's Gate, comparing it to one of Hollywood's biggest disasters. Instead of focusing on the effort or the challenges, the media focused on the failures, turning Kevin into the face of Hollywood excess. When Waterworld released, it earned money, but not enough to silence the critics. People were waiting for it to fail, and when it didn't succeed at the level they expected, they declared it a disaster anyway. For Kevin, the criticism hurt more than the numbers. He had put his heart into the film, and seeing it attacked day after day made him feel like the public was turning against him. But the worst was still ahead. In 1997, he released The Postman, a movie he directed and starred in. It was meant to be a hopeful story about rebuilding after destruction, but Hollywood didn't see it that way. Critics tore it apart. The film won multiple Razzie Awards, including Worst Picture, Worst Actor, and Worst Director. Headlines were cruel. Late-night jokes targeted him. People who once saw him as a hero now treated him like a punchline. Hollywood has a habit of lifting people quickly and dropping them even faster. Studios that once begged him to lead their films suddenly became distant. Audiences who once trusted his name, he began moving on to newer faces. Projects he wanted were harder to get. The industry that once celebrated him began to look at him as someone past his prime. That shift was painful. It wasn't just about his career. It was about losing the sense of purpose he had worked so hard to build. All of this was happening while his personal life was going through its own quiet collapse. Before fame, before the international attention, before the pressure of being Kevin Costner, there was Cindy Silva. They met in college in the 1970s and fell in love when both were young, hopeful, and unsure of the future. Cindy believed in him long before anyone else did. She supported him through the years when he struggled to find acting work, when money was tight, and when his dream felt impossible. They married in 1978 and built a life together with love, patience, and trust. When his career began to rise, Cindy stayed steady and supportive, caring for their home and their growing family. Together they had 3 children, Annie, Lily, and Joe. Cindy gave them stability when Kevin couldn't be there. As his fame exploded, he spent months away from home filming one project after another. Cindy handled birthdays, school events, and daily routines. She carried most of the parenting alone. At first, they tried to balance everything. He called home whenever he could. He flew back between shoots. But fame kept demanding more from him. More time, more attention, more responsibility. Fame can look glamorous, but in reality, it often pushes families further apart. The more Hollywood pulled Kevin outward, the more distance grew between him and Cindy. Over the years, exhaustion began to show. Their conversations became shorter. The gaps between them grew wider. Rumors from movie sets reached the outside world, adding more pressure to a marriage already struggling under fame's weight. Whispers about affairs and emotional distance filled the tabloids, even when nothing was proven. Pain doesn't always come from big events. Sometimes it comes from small cuts, over time missed phone calls, long separations, misunderstandings, and the slow erosion of connection. In 1994, after 16 years of marriage, they decided to separate. The divorce hit the news immediately, and the world paid attention to every detail. The settlement was huge, nearly $80 million, one of the largest in Hollywood history at the time. But people focused on the number, not the heartbreak behind it. It wasn't about money. It was about a life that had once been full of dreams and promises, now ending under the bright, unforgiving lights of public judgment. Kevin kept working, but the emotional cost was heavy. One of the deepest pains for him was realizing he would no longer see his children every day. He had already missed important parts of their childhood because of work, but the divorce meant he would now lose even more time with them. After the marriage ended, Kevin tried to rebuild himself quietly. He made smaller films. He took on projects that allowed him to breathe again. He tried to regain his footing in a world that seemed eager to move on without him. But the world kept watching with critical eyes. Some people believed he was finished. Others thought he would never return to the level of fame he once had. He carried the weight of being judged, not only for his work, but also for his personal life. Day after day, he kept going, even when it felt like life was pushing him down from every direction. Yet, just when it seemed like he had finally regained a small sense of stability, fate delivered losses that hit deeper than any career failure ever could. How do you carry on when the people who shaped your soul begin to disappear from your life forever? For Kevin Costner, the strongest hits in life did not come from critics, budgets, or fame. They came from the people he loved, leaving the world before he had the chance to tell them everything he wished he had said. His mother, Sharon, had always been a quiet, gentle force in his life. She supported him silently, encouraged him without pushing, and held the family together with the kind of emotional strength most people never noticed. One day, while Kevin was on a film set surrounded by cameras, noise, and people, he received a phone call that instantly changed the rhythm of his life. His mother had passed away. There was no warning, no final conversation, no chance to hold her hand or say goodbye. He froze, holding the phone, trying to understand how someone so central to his life could disappear so suddenly. At her funeral, he stood up to speak, but the words felt heavy. He talked about the woman who had carried everyone's pain without letting it show. He shared memories he wished he had appreciated more when she was alive. As he spoke, he realized how much he had taken for granted: her strength, her patience, her quiet sacrifices. He understood too late how deeply she had shaped his character. Losing her left him with a pain he couldn't act through or hide behind a role. It was real, raw, and permanent. The regret of not being there still stayed with him years later. 2 years after losing his mother, Kevin faced another devastating call. His father, Bill Costner, had passed away. Again, Kevin was far from home, again working, again unable to reach him in time. The same regret rushed through him, but now doubled. He missed both parents' final moments. He missed the chance to say the last "thank you," the last "I love you." Kevin later said that when your parents die, something inside you shifts. You suddenly become the parent of yourself, and that realization can shake you in a way nothing else can. His father had been a strong, hard-working man who taught him discipline, responsibility, and the importance of showing up even when life was difficult. Losing him made Kevin feel like the ground beneath him had changed forever. He had always been strong for others, but now he felt emotionally empty. In the middle of all this, grief came another kind of heartbreak, one that touched the world but hit Kevin on a personal level: the death of Whitney Houston. Their connection went much deeper than the film they made together. On the set of The Bodyguard, Whitney had been terrified. She was new to acting and worried she would fail. Kevin became her guide and her protector. He talked her through scenes, calmed her nerves, and reminded her she was talented enough to handle the role. She trusted him more than she trusted her own instincts. He believed in her voice, her presence, her strength. They formed a friendship based on honesty and mutual support. Years later, when Kevin heard she had died, it struck him hard. He knew how much pressure she had always carried. He knew how fragile she sometimes felt inside. Her death wasn't just the loss of a music legend. It was the loss of someone he had cared for deeply. When he was asked to speak at her funeral, he wrote his words late at night, stopping often because the memories were too emotional. Standing before her casket, he said the line that has stayed with people ever since: "You weren't just good enough. You were great." It wasn't a scripted line from a movie. It was a truth he carried in his heart. As the years went on, Kevin began to feel the physical weight of everything he had done in his life. Years of stunts, fights, running, falling, riding, and pushing his body for roles began to show their effects. He dealt with chronic stiffness, sharp pains, and the slow aches that come with decades of physical wear. He moved slower. He rested more. Even simple tasks began to remind him that time was changing him, whether he wanted it to or not. Aging didn't frighten him, but it humbled him. It forced him to think about what really mattered. In Aspen, at his Dunbar ranch, Kevin found a quiet place where he could finally breathe again. Nights in the mountains were peaceful. There were no cameras, no reporters, no schedules, just silence, cold air, and open space. The quiet helped him think. It helped him heal. He walked the land, watched the sky change colors, and spent time with his children. The ranch became a place where he could let go of the noise of his past and listen to the voice inside him that he had ignored for too long. As fame slowly faded into the background, he realized it didn't bother him. He didn't need to be the biggest star. He didn't need awards or headlines. His priorities shifted toward family, meaning, and creating work that felt honest. He became more reflective. He thought about legacy, not in the sense of money or fame, but what kind of man he had been, and what kind of father he still hoped to be. He confronted his own mortality and the shortness of life. He understood that time was precious, and that love, presence, and honesty mattered more than anything his career had ever given him. And in the middle of this, reflection. A new pull began inside his heart, a call to create something meaningful again, something that spoke to the deeper parts of him. This feeling would eventually lead to one of the biggest projects of his later life, but the emotional journey toward it started during these quiet nights in Aspen. But even as he began to find peace again, another heartbreak arrived, the one he never thought he'd have to endure a second time. What does a man do when the love he believed would last forever quietly begins to slip through his fingers? After everything Kevin Costner had gone through, fame, failures, the loss of his parents, and the weight of years, he truly believed he had finally found stability when he married Christine Baumgartner. She came into his life with calmness, patience, and a steady presence. Their relationship didn't begin with noise or pressure. It grew slowly, with mutual respect and understanding. She was younger, thoughtful, and elegant in her own way. With her, Kevin found a gentleness he needed in his life. Their marriage became a place where he could breathe, raise a family again, and build a different kind of happiness. For nearly 20 years, they built a life filled with simple joys. Summers at the ranch in Aspen with horses running in the fields, winters spent building snow forts with the kids, mornings that started with pancakes and laughter, evenings filled with movie nights under blankets. Their 3 children, Caden, Hayes, and Grace, added new meaning to his life. He tried harder this time to be present. He had missed so much in his first children's childhoods, and he didn't want to repeat that mistake. He slowed down his work schedule. He stayed home more often. He attended school plays, soccer games, and quiet dinners. He knew fame could destroy balance if he wasn't careful, and for a long time, he kept that balance steady. But life has a way of shifting even when you guard it carefully. As Kevin entered his late 60 seconds, 2 major projects began pulling him back into the demanding world of filmmaking. The first was Yellowstone, a show that exploded in popularity and required long filming periods far from home. It was a role that reminded the public why they loved him. But the schedule was exhausting. He spent months in Montana, away from his family. The second pull came from deep inside him, Horizon, a film project he had dreamed about for decades. It wasn't just another movie. It was a personal promise to himself, a story he felt he needed to tell no matter the cost. Making the film required enormous time, energy, and money. He invested $40 million of his own savings into it. That kind of commitment takes more than finances, it takes sacrifices. Christine began to feel lonely. She missed him. She missed mornings together and the warmth of his presence. The emotional distance between them slowly grew, not from anger, but from absence. She once said that she wanted a simple life, not a life where she was waiting for her husband to come home week after week. Kevin was torn. He loved his family deeply, but he also felt the pressure of unfinished dreams. He wanted to provide, to create, to fulfill something artistic inside him, but the balance he once held began to slip. In 2023, while he was filming, divorce papers arrived. It shocked him. He didn't expect it. He later told a close friend, "I didn't want this." The breakup of a 20-year marriage wasn't something he had imagined, especially not at this stage of life. The news spread quickly, and the world watched as the details came out. What should have been a private heartbreak became public. Financial arguments began. Christine asked for a high monthly support amount. Lawyers became involved. Rumors spread about betrayal, about tension, about reasons neither of them spoke publicly about. Their quiet, warm world turned into a legal battlefield. Custody discussions added another layer of pain. Kevin loved his children deeply and feared losing time with them the same way he did after his first divorce. The idea of history repeating itself hit him hard. He tried to stay calm in public, but behind closed doors, he struggled. Fame makes heartbreak heavier. It exposes private pain to strangers and turns personal wounds into headlines. But through all of this, Kevin held on to one constant, the love he had for his 7 children. They became the center of his healing. He realized that his children were the true measure of his life. Not awards, not fame, not success. Each child represented a chapter of his journey. Annie, the filmmaker with her own studio. Lily, the gentle singer with a warm soul. Joe, the behind-the-camera storyteller. Liam, quiet, grounded, and thoughtful. And his 3 youngest, still growing, still learning, still forming memories of their father. He tried to show up for them even more after the divorce. He attended school events. He cooked with them. He sat with them during quiet evenings. He knew that they needed him, and he needed them even more. The ranch in Aspen became his sanctuary again. There, away from the noise, he found peace in simple moments, watching his children run across the yard, seeing the sky turn orange in the evening, walking alone on the trails with only his thoughts. He often played old home videos, watching his kids when they were younger. Those videos reminded him of the parts of his life that mattered most. The laughter, the small milestones, the tiny hands he once held. These memories gave him strength. Through the pain of divorce and the challenges of rebuilding, Kevin poured himself into Horizon. It wasn't just a movie. It was his voice, his experience, his heart on screen. He risked a huge amount of money not because he wanted to prove something to Hollywood, but because he wanted to prove something to himself. He wanted to show that dreams don't have an expiration date, and courage doesn't fade with age. Horizon became a symbol of resilience, the same resilience he learned in childhood when moving from house to house. The same resilience that carried him through rejection, loss, and heartbreak. At this stage of his life, Kevin no longer cared about applause or awards. His legacy wasn't about trophies, it was about endurance. It was about loving deeply, even when love didn't last. It was about creating, even when creation came with pain. It was about standing back up every time life knocked him down. Peace didn't come to him through success. It came through understanding what truly mattered. And in the end, as he stands beneath the fading aspen sky, the world sees a legend, but he knows the truth is far more human, far more fragile, and far more extraordinary than anyone ever imagined.